Hello and welcome to When I Stop Fighting, the podcast, where we talk about the fight or fights that so many of us engage in this lifetime, as well as ways to help alleviate those fights. My name is Daryl Dittmer. Let's get started. Welcome to When I Stop Fighting, the podcast. My name is Daryl Dittmer. Today I'm joined by Nick Pollard, a.k.a. the People Displeaser. Nick is a recovered people pleaser and a recovered alcoholic who is committed to helping others achieve the same. If you haven't seen his videos on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok, or YouTube, you have done yourself a grave disservice. As a recovered from a whole bunch of BS guy myself, as soon as I saw a couple of Nick's videos, I said to myself, this dude gets it. Welcome, Nick. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me, Daryl. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks for being here, man. Well, I'm feeling like we're going to have a great conversation. As I mentioned, I loved your videos. I'm fascinated by how you do that, honestly, because that's not part of my gig. I'm just, I'm not that guy yet, but I'm working toward it, man.
Well, it's not going exceedingly well at the moment, so maybe if you can figure out how to do it better than me, I'll follow you.
Yeah, well, we'll share some notes.
Sure.
I'll figure out how to do that sort of stuff. I do these little, I don't know. I don't think I'd call them creepy, but they're kind of like these little videos. I'm sitting talking about something, and you have context, and you have breaks, and you have all kinds of cool stuff. So I'm drawn to it. I'm absolutely drawn to it. I think it's the coolest thing ever. But so to get kicked off, the story is always a big part of what I like to share in terms of getting to know my guests. And my interest is in what brought you to the point in your life where you became the people displeaser.
So full disclosure, the people displeaser moniker, if you will, the name actually came from a very talented musician friend of mine named Marcus Elliott. And he's incidentally, I see we're in a Detroit t-shirt. He's a jazz musician in Detroit, extraordinarily talented. And he and I were in a coaching course together that was terrible. So in this, he was like, how to launch your coaching platform online with a guy named, maybe I don't know if it's defamation, but whatever. It wasn't a great course in my opinion. And we didn't like the course, and it was facilitated by who was in our cohort. The guy was kind of facilitating it poorly, and I was getting irritated in the videos, right? Because that's really all it boils down to is if you want to launch a coaching course online, if you want to launch a coaching program online, you have to be online, right? So you have to make videos, and you kind of have to get past yourself and get real with, what do you want, and can you get past embarrassment? Can you get past all that stuff? So I'd say in that way, it's proven helpful, kind of in hindsight. But anyway, I was getting irritated at the course, and I remember the first video I did with a thumbs up, I did on people pleasing, and I was like, hope this helps. Like me being a dick, right? And Marcus was like, you should just throw a thumbs up and be like, hope this helps, because that was everybody kept saying that in the course. And then it just kind of evolved, right? I was doing all this people pleaser videos, and I was on TikTok at the time, and I just put in people displeaser as a handle just to see if it would pop, if anybody had taken it, and the answer was no. And then that turned into me changing my moniker across all platforms. So it was like the people displeaser was Facebook, right? Which was Instagram rather. So IG didn't have people displeaser; it had the people displeaser, and that is the channel that's exploded. So it's interesting that that's where most people find me is there, right? But I'd say that's the moniker itself was not intentional. The moniker came about on accident, but the change in my persona started to arrive around the age of 29, at which point my life had fallen apart. It turned out that I'm just going to be really honest with you on this one, if that's all right. And I'm just going to kind of go for it. It turned out that my dad was a really bad guy, and he had really hurt me when I was a kid sexually, and I didn't know that for many years of my life. And I had kind of buried that beneath, miles and miles of trying to make him like me. And at one point, we had found out that he had potentially hurt one of my nephews, and it sprung a leak in the dam of my memory, right? And as the water began to seep, and then as it became more of a zephyr, and then as the dam broke, my life really imploded. And I spent about 10 years in various amounts of coping and pain through, the first bout of alcoholism, I'd say in 2009, kind of lasted until 2011. And then I managed to get a handle on it. It was like, it was fine. And then, it slowed down quite a lot in 2011, 2012. And then around 2016, my father passed away. And the problem is that you don't know that you didn't deal with the trauma until somebody rips it open again. Right. And that really ripped open, all this, work that I thought I had done, and all this healing that I thought I had done, all this reading and all, I was doing all the really feel good shit around personal growth that, like, we all do, which is like, I'm going to intellectualize this until I think I've beaten it. Right. Yep. But underneath all of that pain, underneath all that healing, I had just buried it with something else. Right. I'd buried it with Zig Ziglar before, and I'd buried it with Tony Robbins before, and I'd buried it with Brian Tracy and Og Mandino. And I was trying to be the best darn sales guy I could be until I was 29. And I'm really good still. And I learned a lot from those men. And then, then I was like, okay, I'm going to lean into personal growth. I'm going to learn how to breathe and meditate. I'm going to ride bicycles and shit. I'm going to sing Skyrockets in Flight and feel good about myself. Turns out when you just paint over bullshit, it still smells like bullshit. And the walls came crumbling down again. So in 2016, on May 17th, I can actually pinpoint the very moment that my life changed. And I started drinking really heavily, probably beyond what I'd ever done before. And honestly, I was more wounded and more afraid than I think I'd ever been. And I didn't stop doing that until April of 2018. So I spent 2 years, heavy-handedly drinking. And before that, it wasn't good either. My father started to die about a month before. And he went quick. He got a really aggressive form of lymphoma that kind of took him out. And so from really, I'd say probably around April 18th and that may be the date actually, until May, I had just kind of started, and then it got worse, and then stayed worse. And I just kept, kind of degenerating down this awful hole, or kind of degenerating down this hole. And on April 17th of 2018, I called my mom, and I told her I was dying. And I didn't mean that figuratively. I meant that literally. I was literally shaking on a bar stool at 11 o'clock in the morning. I couldn't get food to go down. Couldn't drink anymore. Well, I did end up drinking more, but I couldn't drink anymore. And I said, I need you to come get me and put me in rehab. It's a long way of saying that in 2009, I realized, I think for the first time, that I had been living my whole life to try and live up to who I thought he wanted me to be. And the challenge was I couldn't do it fast enough. So I never went to college, really. I mean, I went and got an English degree, but I never did because I wanted to get there faster, right? I wanted to be a wonderkind. I couldn't tolerate that I wasn't enough now, right? At 29, 29, I'm not enough. what a surprise. Nobody at 29 is enough. You've got a lot of fucking work to do. So,
I stuck to 29. Yeah,
right.
absolutely.
So that was the first time I realized that I was trying to do it for him. In 2018, I started to realize I was doing it for everyone but me. And that was a big shift. And I started to do really well. And then, as I'm wont to do, I started to throw everything away about 9 months later. At this point, I'm in roofing, and my buddy owns the company, and I'm crushing it. I'm making good money, and like my life's slowly getting better again. What do I go and do? I go and get in a relationship with somebody toxic as shit. And we blow my life up for 2 years. Now, at this point, I'm still making money and I'm still successful, in the, kind of monetary term, or I guess, societal expectational term. And so we did that for 2 years. And then in 21, we broke up. Thank God. And I was sitting in an Airbnb, broke again. This is the third time in 13 years that I'm broke as shit. And I'm crying. I have the only thing I owned at that point, I had an RV that was worth about 30 grand, and I ended up selling it. And I had my COVID unemployment coming in. And I had a few bucks from the roofing company still left over. And I was sitting and I have this computer, right? I still have it, actually. Still have the damn thing. It's here with me. And and I was sitting there crying. I was typing letters out to myself, right? And these long, kind of arduous, like I love you kind of letters. And I was just doing this catharsis of trying to figure out what the fuck. And all at once it came to me, and it was like I got hit in the head with a brick. It was like, I've never fucking done anything for myself. Mm-hmm. I've never made a decision that was just for me. Right? Not one time in my life. I can look back on everything. Not once have I done anything that was even remotely what I wanted to do. And I've always, at that point, wanted to travel, and I still do travel quite a lot. And I had this kind of moment where I was like, all right, where can I go? Like, the only thing that I thought was open was the United States. So I'm like, well, I've got the RV, but gas is $5 a gallon, and it's a V8 Detroit diesel. Like, it gets so it's going to cost me $1,000 to go from here to, Las Vegas. So I don't want to do that. Right. And so I just Googled what countries are open, and Costa Rica popped up. And I was like, okay, well, I could do 2 Costa Rican weeks. Like, I'll file my unemployment when I get back. It won't be a big deal. And like, I'll just do the thing, right? I'll just go down there. And I did. I booked these tickets. And on April 4th of 2021, I left for Costa Rica, and I didn't turn my ass around from traveling for 2.5 years.
Very cool.
And by the way, I only intended to go for 2 weeks. So I kept taking this exit ticket from Costa Rica and changing it. So it went from so the exit ticket from Costa Rica turned into an exit ticket from Mexico, which turned into another ticket to Mexico. And then, so I actually had the same return ticket. Now that I think about it, I had the same return ticket for like 19 months.
Wow.
Wow. And through that, I started to really, that's when I launched the coaching company. I told you about the moniker and how that all happened. And I kind of got to a place where I'm like, I really love my life, and I want to keep doing it the way I'm doing it. And, how do I do that? How do I live in a way that's more productive and conducive to who I want to be, was kind of the question I was asking. And, what does it look like to align with a purpose? And I had been a coach for years. I love coaching. I love working with people, and coaching was the first thing I thought of. And, it's virtual. I can do it from anywhere. And it's like, that all lines up with who I want to be. And I started making videos, and the People Displeaser was born.
I love it, man. I do. It's a great story. And I'm right with you on, I got sober at a young age, but my life was disastrous, especially in the younger years. But before I got sober, because I was doing everything for everybody else and I wanted to please everybody else. And that was the only thing that really mattered to me, is if I matter to you, or if I do the shit that I think you want me to do, then my life is okay. Right. And that's just a horrifying way to live. And, I got sober and just because we get sober doesn't mean, everything's great all of a sudden, right?
It makes it so much worse.
It does. It sucks because you can't get away, right?
Sure.
You're trying to wriggle away, and it's like, well, no, you can't. I'm sorry. And
go ahead. Well, you're describing what I work with a man named Dr. Robert Glover, who's become a friend and colleague through this journey, and I'm working through his certified coaching program now, and we talk about this kind of nice guy syndrome. That's basically what you described. Is I'm managing my shame by making other people happy, right? And then before that, you were managing your shame by drinking, right? And so when you get rid of one, you got to get rid of the other, and then you got to figure out, okay, how else am I managing this toxic, I'm not enough, I'm a piece of shit shame? And you just constantly through that battle. It's really exciting. And then the more successful I got, the harder this got.
It's hard, man. I mean, I was 19 when I got sober. So I'm this idiot that's now sober.
Right.
And so I have to figure out what happens with life now. For me, I got involved in the 12 steps. That was just a
Sure.
place where I could, what's that?
It's helpful. It's been very helpful. Yeah.
I found a framework. I found a way of living. I didn't look at it like that at the time.
Sure.
But, it was a framework and it was a way of living for a kid who probably stopped, any sort of emotional moves forward at,
sure.
I don't know, 10, 11, so here I am. And I didn't come from any money or anything like that. So I had to figure it out. Like, how do I do life now? And the 12 steps was that framework for me, and sure. Mentors and that sort of thing. It sounds like mentors have been very helpful for you also.
I'd say some. I was on the road, and I've never really had strong male people in my life up till recently. And boy, what a change that makes. I mean, what a difference it makes to have men in my life that care about me and want me to succeed. So yes, I think the 12-step programs helped me get sober. They didn't really help me stay that way. Because I didn't have access on the road.
Mm.
So I was just kind of like, how do I keep myself from doing this dumb thing? I know it's going to screw me up. So it was just, it's what I learned a lot from them, which, just one day at a time. Like, I'm not going to drink today, and, then I won't drink tomorrow. And, the same goes for dieting. I'm kind of on a weight loss journey right now, about 35 pounds overweight. And that's not a lot for me. I'm a big dude. But like, it's, what do I eat today, not tomorrow? And, how do I manage this tomorrow will be tomorrow. Right. And I think that nice guy syndrome is kind of the same, but it's the same thing.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely. I'm, it's easy to get sucked into a whole bunch of shit, right? It's easy to get sucked into anything that can keep me from burying my face in what I need to bury my face in, which is, how do I improve me, right? How do I make myself a better player in this world, in this universe, for other people? I've never, I've coached basketball, but I've never coached humans necessarily, or at least formally. I've done a lot informally and sponsored people and that sort of thing, but
sure.
But I've never formally coached anyone, and I wonder what that journey is like, because it sounds like in giving back, it's a great sort of way to move yourself forward as well.
Yeah, I'd say the work I've done in, more specifically in my boundary boot camps with kind of one-to-many, modality has been really useful for me, and just kind of teaching how to work through what are your boundaries with yourself more than anybody else. And then I think the one-on-one work, I'd say it's self-servingly altruistic, which is because I work with men who are very successful, and I end up caring about them. They end up caring about me. So I have this kind of awesome network of men worldwide that I can, if I'm really in trouble, I know what to do, right? Just reach out to my boys, and they'll either come get me or they'll help me get back up, right? And that's what I think. I think that's what it looks like when you stop fighting alone. To quote your book, it's like When I Stopped Fighting is a great title. When I stopped fighting alone, thank you, is when that's when it got interesting. And I battle still, so I'm not sober any longer. I'm what we call a recovered alcoholic. You probably know as much about that I do, which is I tend to allow myself the occasional drink from here to there, right? And in recent weeks, I posted a video around how I was going to quit drinking again for a year. And the reason I'm doing that isn't because I see it as a problem. I see it as a hindrance, right? I see alcohol now as like, when I use that substance, it should be for the purpose of societal enhancement. It should make my life better when I do it. Anything I do, if it's not making my life better, then it's probably making my life worse, right? And I started to recognize that there's some things in the background, kind of running background apps in my head that are not getting dealt with around fear. I mean, I've got a book coming out. I'm scared, right? Of course. I've never been on that stage. I've never had that kind of exposure, provided it gets any exposure. And then there's that fear too, is like, I'm going to write this whole fucking thing. Nobody's going to read it. And then, and then, my Instagram following is doing good, not great. So it's like, it's actually shrinking a bit, which is, I understand it's kind of part of the process as I kind of figure out a new style of voice and do more of me. And like, so I have all these fears, right, that are playing around. And I said to myself the other day, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, I'm going to not do this for a while. Right. And I'm just going to let myself have that. And I'm going to let myself have sobriety one more time. And I'll be darned if I didn't just screw it up in like 5 days. And I was like, okay, so what's this? Like, what is this? Right. So instead of kicking my ass now, like I used to, I get curious. Right. And I play now in this world of like, okay, what is that? Like, why did I do that? Right. And
yep.
Or more importantly, I think the question is like, what makes me do what I do? Right. And when you ask yourself that question, be really prepared. Like, what makes me do what I want to do? You're going to get an answer and you're probably not going to like it.
True. Yeah. No,
right?
I the fear thing, I'm with you, man. And I've been doing this for a bit, and not the podcast thing, not the book thing, nothing, just the life thing. Right. And trying to get better at it. And I'm not a young guy, but there are times, I mean, when I wrote my book, I'm going from, oh, wow, that's pretty cool. My wife reads it. She's like, yeah, that's pretty cool. And then I'm like, oh man, you suck. Nobody's ever going to buy this thing. Nobody cares. Nobody's, you know what I mean? I'm having those conversations with myself, but then, then I have to just be like, you know what, quit being a wimp. And just write the
feel free
thing.
To use your full range of expression. I'm clearly doing that. So
quit being a puss bag, right? I mean, I have to put myself in a position where I am scared and it's okay, and I just keep going, right? I mean, right. That's what life is. Right. If you talk to anybody in my life that has known me for more than 20 years, they'd be like, Daryl, podcast, like, what the fuck? What's going on? Like he's not the podcast guy. He's not, he would never be a guest on a podcast. He would never do a podcast himself. It's
sure.
But these are all the things as I, and I say this kind of tongue in cheek, but not really. As I grow up, right, I figure out what I need to do, and I'm continually led. And it sounds like you're led, and you're just going. And I love the fact that you ask yourself those questions because that's what it takes. And then for me, I have to be able to stomach the answer. And usually stomaching the answer has to do with just shut up and fucking do it,
Right. Well, I mentioned earlier that, my Instagram's it's not going great right now. That's fine. Right. And I know what to do to fix it. It's record videos and post. That's it. That's it. It's go find my voice again. Right. But that means I have to commit to some shit I don't like doing. I don't want to do 3 videos a day again. I'm tired of it. I've been doing this for 4 years. I'm so tired of routine. How much more can I say about boundaries, for God's sake? But if I look back at my videos, I really didn't talk about boundaries much. If I realistically look, I think there are 12 videos that did pretty well around the boundary conversation. 12 in 3 years. And I'm known as the boundary guy. Right.
Yeah.
So what I'm known for is what I show up as. It's not about, and that's what I think people, and if you're listening and you're trying to get sober, or if you're trying to figure out, who you are, or you're trying to break people pleasing, whatever pattern that is, it's you are who you pretend to be. So be really careful who you pretend to be. Right. Yeah. Kurt Vonnegut said that many, many years ago. It's something that stuck with me. Is our minds are like powerful things. Yeah.
Yeah.
He's my favorite author, so if I quote Kurt, it's probably why. I've read all this shit. Incidentally, he was a ravenous drunk. He talks about how he would sit in his living room and type with his pack of Pall Malls and a bottle of scotch and his dog, and they would talk some, he and his dog. And then, right about midnight, he would pick up the phone and he would dial an old girlfriend's number from 30 years ago and try and find her, back when he had rotary dial the phone. But he ended up sobering up very late in his life. And the letters he wrote himself are actually really fascinating. So it's this whole thing's a journey. And it's supposed to be a fun one. It's supposed to be a little fun. It's also supposed to be really painful. Robert Glover says, we're born to hurt. Right? At the end of we are born dying.
Yeah.
So the minute you're born, clock started ticking.
Yeah. So what the hell do I do in between? Right? What the hell do I do in between? And that's the question.
Right. Mark Manson said that. He's when you realize that nothing matters, everything matters.
Right.
Right. Nothing matters. Nothing you do matters. So then everything you do matters. Right. Everything you do unto you matters.
It's I know we're throwing out the quotes here, but it made me think of the your life is made up of 2 dots and a dash. Make the most of the dash. Or two.
That's
two
dates. Who said that?
Dash. 2 dates and a dash. Make the most of the dash. You know what? I don't remember, and it wasn't me. But we'll give credit to someone else. I just don't know who the hell it was. But
we need a podcast producer like Jamie on the Rogan show. We would already have. He would have known that quote before we even said it.
Right. Yeah. I mean, I think it's interesting because once I've accepted, and for me, it's the fighting thing. And I can fight anything. I will fight myself. I will fight somebody else if they want me to. I will fight how I do things. If it's not working, get a bigger hammer. I mean, that's how I grew up, and that's what I was taught. And if there's not a bone sticking out or you're not bleeding out, you're not hurt. I mean, all those kinds of things, right? So, yeah. So how do I take that, that box of stuff that I'm handed when I'm a kid, whatever that box is? We all have a different box, but it's all probably shit that we need to figure out at some point, right?
Yeah,
it's or jettison or whatever it is. So how do we take that box and jettison or sort it out and make a life out of it?
I think
that's the question.
Going back to your kind of alma mater in personal growth, it's through acceptance, right? And it's interesting. I went to my first AA meeting this week. I hadn't been in 2 years, but I went with a friend of mine because I'd kind of hit that bump, and I just wanted to see that. I wanted to see that world again, right? And say, okay, I know what this looks like. I know who I am. I know where I came from, right? I happened to go to, it was like one of those ones where they read the 12 principles, and and we were talking about the idea of powerlessness against alcohol, which I actually disagree with that narrative, but I won't fight it. I won't fight anybody on it, because I want you to do whatever works for you. And I don't, and it's not because I disagree that you're powerless against alcohol. I think you're powerless against everything.
Yeah.
Right. And so there's really only, in the Stoics talk about, there's really only two things in your life that you can control. It's yourself, and barely that, and how you feel about things. Right. And so I think when you relieve yourself of outcome-based thinking, when you stop thinking toward outcome and start thinking toward leading measures rather than lagging measures, and doing the front end work because you enjoy the front end work, because the journey is important, then what I find is this kind of joyfulness in the simplicity of life. It's really not all that complicated if you take away the outcome. So if I go into this next 9 months of where I get to, to quote Gary Vee, where I get to make 3 fucking videos a day again. As I move into that version of my life, if I'm focused on like, I got to get 5 coaching clients, or I've got to sell so many workshops, or if I'm focused on that outcome, then I'm going to be screwed. The only thing I can really do is say, okay, I'm going to do the work. And if the work doesn't work, then I have to change what I'm doing. Right. And I think people get caught in kind of this sunk cost fallacy. And I think this is part of what's been going on for me, is that I'm like, well, I've been the boundary guy for so long that, like, if I don't talk about boundaries, how are people going to know what I'm selling? Who gives a shit if they know what I'm selling?
Just do the work. Yeah.
Just do the fucking work. Just get out there and make the videos, make the contacts, do the things that you need to do, and love people where they are. And Daryl, I think that's probably the biggest thing that people miss, like, especially in an election season, is it's actually really easy to do life when you love people. And it also makes it exponentially harder, but life becomes real easy when you just give away love and kindness, with boundaries, of course, and let whatever comes come.
Yeah. I mean, I 100%. I'm fascinated by, and it, it takes a long time, right? And experience matters, and all of the journey matters. Sure. And I get my teeth kicked in every once in a while, and that's just part of it. But the key for me is, what am I making out of myself so that I can be good to people, so that I can smile at the cashier and strike up a conversation and be kind. So I'm not all wrapped up in my own shit. I'm actually able to think about, and I don't think about loving other people as much as I do just being a kind person, being a good person, being a person who can pay attention to others, because I don't have to worry about all my own shit. And
right.
And that's a very freeing place to be.
Yeah. You're not wrong about that. What do you think is, like, when you think of meaning, what do you feel is the meaning of all this?
This whole life thing?
Yeah.
I honestly, I don't ask myself that question. Not because I'm seriously, not because I'm, nervous about, oh my God, what if I get it wrong? Or, oh shit, what is the meaning? You know what I mean? Like, oh, they told me in church the meaning was try not to go to hell,
Right.
And which I jettisoned a long time ago. So that one went out the door when I was like 22.
You would be both. Just try not to go to hell. Oh,
yeah, just try not to go to hell. But the problem
is, meaning is the next thing. It's like,
but the problem is, you do so much dumb shit, Daryl, you're probably going to hell.
Right.
Like, if I believe that way. So those things I had to jettison. The meaning of life to me at this point in my life is, and this is just off the cuff because I don't think about it, but it's to be the best version of myself that I can be, so that I can be a good version of myself for everybody else in the world.
Sure.
And then I die, and that's cool.
Right. Right. At the end of the day, I'm a quote guy, clearly today. It's not very often that I get all the quotes in my brain, but Jim Morrison said it best. No one here gets out alive, right? And there's beauty in that. In my estimation, I've lived by this axiom for a while. It changed a little, but I believe that love and adventure are the meaning of life. I've believed that for a long time. I added in kindness recently because I believe that kindness is synonymous with all things good. Kindness is synonymous with honesty. Kindness is synonymous with adventure. Kindness is synonymous with the word yes and the word no. Kindness is I think when you look back at a life well lived, no one will ever say, I wish I had been less kind. Right.
Yeah.
And I had so little of that in my life until I started giving it away.
For sure. The evolution of, starting out with only giving a shit about what I can get, only giving a shit about what matters to me, only giving a shit about, what's in it for me. Right.
Right.
Like as that sheds, and that can be like wriggling out of a freaking, I think of, what was it? Ace Ventura: Pet Detective, when he comes out the back end of a rhino.
Yeah.
And he's like, oh man, and he's wriggling out of this thing and he just flops on the ground. I mean, that's what it's like, ripping away all of these layers of me. And right. when I rip away those layers of me, an entire panorama opens up, right? Like it's this whole new world of like, holy shit, I can be useful and I can be helpful. And even if I just smile at someone on the sidewalk, maybe I'm helping them have a lot better day than they were having before that, and being able to think about those kinds of things is a blessing to me. And I'm grateful for it, because if I'm wrapped up in all my own shit, like, what's the point? There's a whole world out there that ain't me.
So I do this video from time to time where I talk about how nobody gives a shit what you're doing. And there's a chapter in my book. My book's ridiculous, by the way.
I can't wait.
It's completely ridiculous. It's basically a debauched memoir with coaching stories at the end to help you kind of take back your life. But one of the chapters is called That Time I Shit Myself at the Giggling Grizzly. And and it brings me back to this kind of thought through this arc of a conversation, which this has been fun, man. But this arc of a conversation kind of given way to this idea that like who you are today won't even resemble who you're going to be in 5 years. Like you will forget this version of you, within days, weeks, or years. You will forget this version of Daryl because you'll be writing your third book, right? You'll be an author 3 times. You'll be best-selling. You'll be doing something different, right? And that moment back then, and I won't give away the story too much because it starts as much as it ends exactly how I described it. And
I'm having a hard time moving past it, man, but all right, let's go.
But it's like, I'll tell you the story if you want. I'll give you the Cliffs notes, but when I think back on that one, and I'm really grateful for this, by the way, this conversation, because you finally have given me the coaching answer to that chapter, which is, who are you now? Who were you 5 years ago? And then who do you want to be 5 years from now? Right. If you can condense all that into one narrative, then best of luck to you. But you can't predict that. You know what that is behind you. Right. But you couldn't have predicted now that you'd be here. Even when I was stuck in my, bottle a day alcoholism, I would have never thought I'd have been there at 33, right? Or 36 or 30, 38. It was my 38th birthday was the last time I went super hard. And then, it started to devolve again. And it was like, this has got to stop. Right. So I could have never convinced myself. Oh, shit. I'll tell you right now, I was in my AA meeting in 2021. I was talking to my sponsor, Paul, if you're listening, thanks for doing that. I was a disaster. And And I said, I want to start this coaching company, but I'm afraid because I'm never going to be successful financially. And he goes, who the hell says that? Like, where did you get that data? I know a lot of successful coaches. And I'm like, but you can't, all the coaches I know are broke and like all these things. And I'm not broke. I've got a very happy, successful life. I'm not wealthy by any stretch, but like, I never imagined 5 years ago that I would have traveled the world for 2.5 years, that I would have been to 8 countries, that I would have lived in Argentina for 3 months. Like, none of that I thought was going to happen. Right. And let alone did I think I'd be on an author's podcast, that I would meet Dr. Robert Glover, that I'd be on my way to meeting the big podcasters of the world. Like, all of this is coming true. But 5 years ago, Jesus, I was just trying to stop eating Sour Patch Kids every morning.
It's the little victories, right? No, that's right. Yeah, no, it's true. I've held this for a long time in terms of my life, and when things are going really shitty, there's this part that's like, oh man, what the hell is going to happen next, right?
Right.
And when things are going really well, and you find a place where there's some contentment and you're feeling better and things, you're like, man, I can't freaking wait for what's next, and the best part of life at that point becomes, for me, how it happened was I can't wait to see what's going to happen next. And bad shit happens. I've had tons of bad stuff in my life and whatever. I mean, that's just part of it. And that's part of the journey. Like you mentioned earlier, life is about pain. Right. And I think, what's his name? The Road Less Traveled,
Scott Peck.
Yeah, M. Scott Peck. He talks about that. Life is pain, and it's a difficult journey. And
do you know that he was that is still to this day the number one best-selling self-help book of all time?
Oh wow, I did not know that.
Yeah, they still sell millions of copies of that. He was an alcoholic, like almost till the day he died, and smoked like 2 packs a day.
Wow.
And somebody asked him, like, why, if life is pain and that, and the secret is to give up, somebody said, why don't you give up smoking? And it was after he'd gotten sober. And he goes, I'm not ready yet.
Yeah.
Like, how powerful is that? I'm just not ready yet.
Right. I don't blame him. And
right.
Right. Right. I mean, I've
got my little vape here. Like, nicotine's a part of my life. It's staying that way for a while. I'm okay with it.
Yeah. And that's the thing. And that's, another thing that when I talk about the fight, those are the fights, right? Right. You mentioned the word should earlier, and I think of it like I just, I can either should on myself like you did at the Big Grizzly bar or whatever the hell it was. But
the Giggling Grizzly. Shout out to Denver, Grizzly. Right? They know who they are.
Should all over myself, or I can I can understand that life is life, and stuff comes and stuff goes, and that's the trick, right? That's right. what we hopefully develop over time in terms of our life. And I didn't quit smoking until I was, oh Lordy, 20 some years sober.
Good for you. So you were in your 40s.
Yeah.
Almost. Yeah. So you're right about where I am. So
don't tell my basketball coach from college that I smoked the whole time. But
well,
anyway.
I've moved over to this from the Marlboros because it was getting out of control. Like, I'm 44. I want to be in good shape. And there it is, right? There it is. Like, I looked at it just like I did with alcohol in the last few months. Like, is this serving the greater purpose of who I'm trying to be? Is this somebody that I can respect? Right. Yeah. I have this question I ask myself. Really important one is like, what am I doing that I know I shouldn't be doing that doesn't align with who I want to be? And I ask it about every 6 months, right? usually right before a crisis. Right. And I'm looking at my life and I'm like, okay, I've had a hangover a couple of times this week.
You see a train coming in the opposite direction. Like, yeah.
I ask myself that question. I'm like, and as well as I do, how ravenous and dogmatic the rooms can be, especially, for somebody who calls themselves a recovered alcoholic. And so I posted this video and I just got torched by the AA rooms, and it's fine. I know, it's fine. You guys do you. But at the same time, I was like, I don't want to be that either. I don't like going and doing a thing and calling myself something I'm not anymore. And so I don't, right? And I think the minute people let go of their dogmas and start living their lives is the minute we become crazily more productive, right? Like I did the same with religion. I just, if you ever see Bill Burr talk about how he let his religion go, he kind of, there it went, right? I didn't read anybody the Riot Act. I didn't go nuts. Just like, okay, that's not serving me. It's not who I am, right? And again, it comes down to kindness. Kindness is nothing if you're not kind to you as well. And, am I going to slip in the next year? Yeah, I'm okay, right? I know who I am. I know what's going to happen. And am I perfect? The answer is no. And do I intend to be? The answer is also no. And do I want to be? The answer is also no. I mean, who wants to hang out with a perfect person? That person would be boring as fuck. Like, you have everything figured out. What are we going to talk about?
Horrifying.
I'm a disaster. That's
right.
That's what makes us. That's what makes this, community of love like happening, in the world is, people that we can get together and have a cool conversation because both of us realize we're still fucked up. And like, I'm going to go to my grave fucked up. So I may as well just be fucked up and know that like I can fix the little things, and little things turn into big things, and big things turn into big things. And
there's a word that I love and that I've just kind of latched onto of late, but it's allow. Like I have to be able to allow myself to be fucked up, or I have to decide that I'm going to change that piece. And there is no other way, because the only other way then is just friction. If I'm doing it differently than that, I'm either allowing it or I'm changing it. And if I'm not allowing it, and there's a part of my book called Turning on the Ass Kicking Machine. I can just turn on the ass kicking machine and kick my own ass around for years about something that I know I need to change, but I'm not changing. So I just keep kicking my own ass. Like, what's the point of that? And there is no point, but it takes time to understand that.
Sure.
That probably the point is that I need to learn to stop kicking my own ass. You mentioned the rooms, and I haven't gone to a meeting in many, many moons. And for no other reason other than, I had to get on with life, and I had to get on with moving things forward in ways that weren't necessarily in the rooms. And, it's all in the principles and all that sort of thing. And
sure.
That's completely cool with me. And I've explored so many other ways to improve my relationship with myself and the world. But AA would they'd freaking slam dunk me right now, in terms of the things that I would say at a meeting.
Right.
And I don't want to mess anybody else up, but I also, there's this part of life that isn't necessarily contemplated in the rooms, which is you can be totally free. And that doesn't mean totally not fucked up, because you can still be fucked up, but still be free. And that's a hard thing for people to get their head around, because people attach to their afflictions, people attach to their disease or their, whatever. And it's like, if you don't attach to that, then you can be free.
Well, there's this narrative of trauma fetishization that's going on in the world right now, where everybody's, anybody that's mean to me is a narcissist, and like, everybody's, blacklisting their parents. And listen, you're free, like, especially if you're in the Western world. Are there people that are not free? Yeah. But even people that aren't free are still free, because, once you have your own mind, you can kind of accomplish anything. Right. And decidedly, or would they say that, the two of us are wildly privileged as we sit here with our, pasty white shaved heads, drinking coffee and smoking on a vape? Sure. but not as privileged as some others, and potentially maybe not privileged at all, because I was born onto a very flawed planet, just like everyone else. And the narrative around what is freedom is this idea that you don't have to identify with things that you don't identify with anymore. You know, I had some friends that I really love, and they're still good friends, and they'll always be friends. And when I quit drinking, they're like, "What, are you not going to drink with us anymore? Are you too good to drink with us?" Yeah. Yikes. Right? Yeah, the answer is yes to that.
Yeah.
Does that make me a bad person? No. Does it mean that I have kind of a different set of rules and targets that I'm aiming at, that I want to be something else? Then the answer to that is also yes. And I think going back to this idea of change is like we a very good friend of mine, his name's Cody Rain. He founded a company called Beyond Sober, and he'd be a great guest for you, by the way. He's kind of reminds me of Pauly Shore, if Pauly Shore wasn't, kind of old and decrepit at this point. But he reminds me of Pauly Shore, and he kind of talks like Pauly Shore. He's very excited about who he is. He was probably the reason I made it through that first year of sobriety. And one of the things he says is, what you don't change, you choose. Right? If you're not changing it, you are choosing it. And lack of decision is also a decision. And if there's something in your life that's plaguing you, whether it's people pleasing or alcoholism, or you're a narcissistic, wanton piece of shit, if it's something you want to change it.
Right.
I've often, it's funny, the narcissism narrative is so big now. And I've been the narcissist in a lot of stories, very specifically around women. And I'll admit freely that you take a nice guy, like certifiable, Dr. Robert Glover, nice guy, or a people pleaser, and you pour a bunch of booze on top of that, you're getting a narcissist. Like, you combine those two, combine those two things, and you're getting a real piece of shit.
Yeah. No doubt.
I was awful. The kind of guy that shits himself at a bar on a Tuesday night.
I mean, there's so much to be said for, I think, changing how we approach. We have to change how we approach life so we can move life forward in a way that makes sense for everybody, makes sense for every relationship that we have. And
right.
One of the things that I actually, my wife and I used to talk about, and we used to say, we had a restaurant for a few years, and we used to say, in terms of the staff and people that work for us, whom we loved, most of them, but you get what you tolerate.
Sure.
You get what you tolerate in business, but you also get what you tolerate within yourself. If you're tolerating bullshit from yourself that you're handing yourself, then you deserve every bit of it, and how do we sort of eke ourselves out of that nightmare, is the quest.
Right. And you said it earlier. It's like, if kicking your own ass was going to work, it would have worked already.
It would have worked already. Yeah, no doubt.
I mean, I'm good at it. Like, I'm, pretty successful at kicking my own ass. So yeah, I think there's huge levity in understanding that ultimately you decide how your life turns out. And you can't predict the lagging measures of what success looks like to most people. Right. So you can't predict how much money you'll make. You can't predict how big your company will get. You can't predict how much of a coach you'll be or won't be. There's no real delineator for how you look at. I mean, there's delineators, but there's really no predictors. There's no, correlation doesn't always mean, operate against causation, which, I could have founded eBay too, or I could have founded, PayPal too. But would I have turned into Elon Musk? Right. Well, the answer is no, because I'm not crazy. Right. And I actually love that guy. I think he's even said in podcasts, like, you wouldn't want to live in my mind.
I'm
it's
sure.
scary in there. It's painful in there. And I think that when people start to realize, and I had to realize this, that I don't actually want to be a billionaire. I don't want any part of that. I don't want the mega yacht. I mean, you give me one, I'll take it, but I don't know how I would pay to operate it. Right. So when you think about, I don't want any of that. I want a quiet, relatively obscure life, which I've managed to screw up already because I've become, I have a modicum of fame, but a quiet, reasonably. I want to be able to like go on a trip when I want. Right. I want to be able to buy my girlfriend a nice ring. I want to be able to I want to buy nice jewelry for her. I don't care much about clothing. I don't care much about shoes. Like I buy 2 pairs of Zero shoes every year. I don't care. And I want to go to a nice gym. My wants are really simple. And when I have them, but you get there and you're like, well, shouldn't I want more than this? No.
I mean, whatever people want, they want, and that's cool. I grew up, we didn't have much, we had enough money to feed us and clothe us and,
Sure.
Blah, blah, blah. And we were fine. Like it wasn't like we were poor. My dad was a mechanic and whatever. But when I was younger, I had this idea of success that was, money and cars and blah, 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 this and that, right? Like all this stuff. And then at some point, I don't know how long ago it was, but at some point, after just kicking the shit out of myself for a long time, trying to get all those things, I'm like, all right, well, if I have any more surgeries and I have any more problems and I have any more issues, I'm not going to be around that much longer, So I've got to figure out what success is for me. And for a long time, success has been waking up in the morning with a smile on my face. And there's a lot of shit that goes into that equation and into that formula, but waking up in the morning with a smile on my face is success to me. And I'm fortunate to say that's what I do now. And I thank God, I'm not. Yeah, that's just it's cool.
It's a little too simple, isn't it?
It is. It's so freaking simple. And everything in my life I've had to boil down from like this gargantuan freaking nightmare to like this little thing that's like, oh, it's the size of a peppercorn. I can get my head around it. It's all really simple. It's somebody said
that about my channel is that I oversimplify growth. Well, yeah, because it's simple.
So simple.
It's just do the fucking work.
Right.
Right. Like, I used to think that I had to have all these trinkets. Right. So instead I started getting tattoos everywhere I go. Right. Like I've got this hamburger that my girlfriend drew for me on my arm. It's called a chivito. It's a sandwich I had in Uruguay. And by a sandwich I had in Uruguay, I mean, I had it 5 times in 3 days. Nice. Because my brain is going to overdo everything.
Oh yeah.
Right. And they are like 1,500 calories a piece. I waddled off the plane in Panama. Right. And so what? Right. So what if I've got a few extra pounds? Like, and if you're listening and you're feeling that too, it's like, it took me 2 years to get to the weight I am. It took me 2 years to get down underneath it too. Right. And Jordan Peterson talks about how you can have anything you want in 5 years, as long as you know what it is and you aim at every day. And you're willing to wait 5 years. But you have to be willing to wait 5 years.
Right.
Right.
And go through the shit.
Right. And my ghostwriter, so I have ADD, as most people who struggle with, addictive personalities do. And I recognized kind of early on that like, I'm going to need some help to get this book done. So I hired a guy named Jeff Goins, who's a best-selling author, and he and I were talking. He's become kind of a mentor because he's been very successful in internet marketing. And he said, Nick, your life is going to suck. Like from now and like until 5 years from now, and in 5 years, you're going to say something stupid. Like, I would really like to scale my company. And then it's going to suck again.
Yeah.
And he's like, everything you do is going to suck, but it always leads, like you make bigger and bigger bets in your life as you go along. And then like you do that until you have enough that making small bets equals big returns.
Right.
right? And so, one of those big bets is like, I'm gonna bet on sobriety because I know that that's valuable. I know what that's going to give me, right? It's going to give me an entire year of perfect clarity, right? And if you're struggling with people pleasing, or you're struggling with boundaries, or you're struggling with, like, anything that you're struggling with can be solved kind of in two ways. Like, you got to get sober from something almost every time. And then you have to take care of your physical well-being. If you can focus on those two things, like get sober from whatever that is, and it doesn't have to be a substance, it doesn't have to be food, it doesn't have to be sex, it could be anything. It could be making other people happy, right? But you always have to get sober from something, and you always have to focus on your physical well-being. If you do those two things, you've started a journey.
Without a doubt. Yeah, without a doubt, man. One of the things I talk about in my book is it's a holistic approach to life. I mean, it's body, mind, heart, and soul for me. And right. So, the body part, if I'm trying to, sit in Nepal and hang out on a mountain and just meditate all day, but then, I take a break and go to McDonald's 3 times a day, I'm probably going to have issues.
Right.
I'm doing something I know that I'm not supposed to be doing.
Right.
Yeah.
And life is so funny, man. It's, I'm really lucky. Like, there's a good component of luck in my life. But it's weird that, it seems the harder I work on myself, the luckier I get. And the more kindness I can bring to other people, the more connections I create, the luckier I get. And the more love that I can give freely because my cup is already overflowing, the luckier I get. And I think if I was ever going to lead off of a podcast and say a thing, it would be to say that the chaos of your life will never stop. So you may as well be kind.
I love it. Yeah, I love it. No, that's great stuff, man. 100%. I've loved the conversation. Very cool kicking it back and forth with you. And to wrap it up, and I'll put all this stuff in the show notes, but how do we find you out there? I know you're out there, and
sure. I'm relatively easy to find. You Google my name, I'm the first person that pops up these days. Pretty cool.
That's very cool.
It's very cool. So to answer to that, my book is coming out. I think we're looking at a 2025 release date, but as an author that I say that and it'll probably be 2026, but look for my book. It's called I Hope You Hate This. It's actually juxtapositioned, I guess, or juxtaposed. Yeah, that's right. Says the author. It's I Hope You Hate This, and then underneath there's in parentheses, I hope this helps. And that's going to be kind of a debauched memoir of learning and what did it mean to me to, of course, shit myself at a bar, and what did it mean to wake up next to a lover that I really wanted that I could never have, and like just kind of these long stories of figuring out how to love myself. And then, but in the more immediate, I am launching my Boundary Boot Camp, which is coming out. You'll see an invite on my Instagram pages and all my other pages as well to a free seminar. It's a 2-day kind of work called Rebellion, how to stop people pleasing, and through that you can get involved in the Boundary Boot Camp, which is it's going to be rebranded, but we're calling it Boundary Boot Camp because we're recording this in August.
Cool, man. No, that's great. I love it. I'm there's a couple other things I was going to mention, but we're running out of time. Next time we'll talk about the joys of toxic positivity, because I had never heard that until I heard it on one of your reels. I was like, oh man, that's why I love this guy.
There's two things in that vein that I'm playing with right now is toxic positivity and toxic hope.
I heard from a who was it? I don't think it was a actual mentor of mine. I might have heard it on a cassette tape when I was in my 20s. But hope is another word for postpone. Does that?
Yep.
That rings with you.
It really is. It's like I came up with the idea of toxic hope on a call with a client of mine. We were talking about the idea that he needed to move on from a relationship. And he said, I can't figure out why I continually engage. And if you look at how toxicity functions in a relationship, it's like, especially if it's somebody that's kind of inherently toxic, It starts out really, really good. And then like you have this moment where it dips, right? And then you level out at that bottom function for a little bit, right? And then you correct to about halfway to where you were. And this kind of step ladder just goes down all the way through the relationship, right? And it just continually gets worse and worse and worse. But the reason that toxic hope is so important in that narrative is because, especially if you're a people pleaser, is hope is also kind of a dopamine response item, right? In terms of emotion, like you see improvement, you get that dopamine hit from it. You're like, yeah, more of that, right? So then you end up kind of craving the down cycle because it gives you that hopefulness hit over and over and over again until the hopefulness is just simply that they don't kill you.
And then you're in hell,
Right. And then you're living in, and then, like I had in 21, there I am in a narcissistic relationship. Both of us were equally toxic at that point. Because I've said, if you put alcohol on top of people pleasing, especially if you put a lot of it on there for an extended period of time, it tends to turn you into a liar. It tends to make you self-centered. It tends to make you dishonest. It tends to make you unkind. It takes away all of the things that I know I am. And as I did that, that's probably where it showed up first, was that timeline of narcissism. I was able to kind of post-mortem look at it and go, holy crap, this like kept getting worse. Right. But I wanted so much to be loved that I would hope for it. And that's where that toxicity shows up. It's like hoping for the best and expecting the worst. I think that's a jack-off narrative that people shouldn't engage in.
Yeah. Yeah. I look at it like, we're always on a launching pad, and how much horse shit is on the launching pad with us, right? Like how many things do we have to kick off the launch pad, right? Get out the snow shovel and kick off all the horse shit and all the stupid stuff and the addictions and the hope, the toxic hope, the toxic positivity, whatever it is. Like you said, there's a million things that could be sitting there next to me on my launch pad. And as long as all that stuff's weighing me down, I can't launch,
Right. Well, and, you and I are going to continue to do this. And I hope we get on another one of these. I really enjoyed this, but it's like people who say to me, like, I feel like I can't get my head above water. Well, yeah, let go of the anchor, dumbass. Like,
yeah.
Okay. So everybody's dragging you down. Maybe let go of a few. Right. Right. And even if it's your parents, like, I think this is, I see it all the time in the people pleasing world, is like, well, I set a boundary with my mom, which is impossible to do because your boundaries aren't with anybody else. They're with you. So there's problem number one. And then problem number two is my mom didn't respect my boundary. And okay, well, she's probably not gonna, because you've been operating this way for 35 years and you expected her to change overnight. And then number three is like, I'm just going to eliminate that person from my life. And then you're going to tell me in a week that you're lonely and nobody likes you anymore. What a surprise. Well, yeah. Right. So too often we think that the line between good and bad, like people pleasing versus being a narcissist, and we're trying to find the balance, right, between those two axiomatic extremes. That idea of like, here's one toxic thing and here's another toxic thing. Well, that through line is insanity by its design, right? This is why sobriety never worked for me, right? Because I wasn't drunk and then I was sober. I needed to get from sobriety, I needed to get to integration, where I was moving up on that ladder, where I'm going, okay, now I'm happy. Like I'm living a life that is genuine to me. And I think when you realize that it's not about being the opposite of what you're being, it's about getting off of that plane of existence, then you can start to accelerate, because the line is lateral. The movement needs to go up.
Right.
And when you're pointing upward, you're not on that line anymore. Right.
Yeah, 100%, man. That my second book, the subtitle is "The Road You're On Is Your Own Asphalt," and it's about true north, and it's about moving forward, and it's not about perfection by any stretch of the imagination, but it's about continuing to improve myself and heading toward a trajectory that makes sense in my life and for me and for the people around me. And And it comes with casting off the bullshit, for myself. It comes with casting off the toxic humans that are surrounding me, all those sorts of things. But when you talk about that leveling up and that continued improvement, that's what I think about is I have to aim my ship toward true north. Chances are I'm never going to hit it, but I got to try to steer it in that direction to the best of my ability.
Well, yeah, and that's kind of one of the principles of I think the first personal growth book I ever read that was really a good one was Maxwell Maltz, Psychocybernetics, and that's the idea of course correction, right? Mm-hmm. Like you recognize you're off course and you point back toward your intended desired goal, right? So you're going to get off course, you're going to screw it up, and it's just a vital part of being who you want to be is recognize that you're going to fail, you're going to get off point, you're going to do this wrong, yes, there's going to be rogue waves, like things are going to happen that are going to throw you off of your bearing, and when they do, your job isn't to it's like if I was driving from New York to Chicago and I took a left on 35 or took a right on 35 rather than going north, I went south toward Texas. Do I then pull the car over and do I get out on the side of the road and pull out a flogger and begin to whip myself, hoping that'll get me there? Right?
Yeah.
Do I need to flatulate myself in order to go where I want to go? No, you get off on the next exit ramp, you figure out the directions, and you point the car north. Like you don't set the car on fire and call it an evil piece of shit, right? You get
right, and think, oh well, all I have to do is think these beautiful thoughts, and my car's going to turn around.
Right. Yeah, all I have to do is turn around. Okay.
Yeah,
sorry. Whoops. Right.
Yeah.
I learned that phrase in the very first workshop I ever facilitated was because I was young. I think I was 33. I was working in this environment that I was way out of my fucking league. I mean, these are like VPs of sales, and I was terrified. And my coach and my business partner at the time pulled me aside right before the course, and he sat me down and he goes, "You are about to fuck up all the time for 2.5 days." And I went, "Great, thanks for the pep talk, JP." And he goes, "Now listen. What you do instead of going to the sideline and kicking your own ass is you just look up at the crowd and go, how fascinating." Right. So, I mean, I suppose I could leave off with that too. Look at your life and be fascinated, because listen, you're not going to get it right. So it doesn't matter.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter. Right. Just be fascinated, be curious, and love yourself.
100%. Keep exploring. Right. Yeah.
Yep.
Keep exploring. All right, man. Hey, thank you. Loved it. Really loved the conversation.
Thank you for having me.
And thanks for coming on. And we'll do this again for sure. I want to get in the mix when your book comes out for sure. And
well, get ready, because I'll be inviting you on my own podcast. I have set my target on doing 1,000 episodes.
Cool. Yeah, I'd love it. Anytime.
I think that's probably an interview a day for 3 years.
For the rest of your freaking life. Yeah.
Right.
No. Yeah, no pressure with that. I mean, shit, that should be easy.
Right. Should be fine.
No, that's all good, man. Good. I'd love to do it. And thanks again, brother. I appreciate you coming on.
Thanks for having me, Daryl.
All right, man.